Good morning, everyone. So today we're working on a couple of different problem areas for a couple of different people. One, we're going to be working on some hip flexor, anterior hip, kind of iliacus area. So we're going to work on the deep hip rotators, trying to get those muscles moving again, getting them to be able to stretch and fire normally. I look at those rotator cuff muscles as being kind of like coiled springs, like in a big truck. The way they work is they absorb energy with every footfall, and then they release energy as your foot releases from the ground, and they can get stuck in a state of compression where you lose that nice springy nature of them, and then we tend to get pain in the hip or in the back or down low in the foot and the knee, or it can go all the way up into the shoulders and the neck. So getting those guys working well can make a big difference in good gait. The other issue we're working on is a swollen knee. So we're going to do a little bit of lacrosse ball and foam roller on the lower leg in order to help with blood flow or just fluid flow, trying to get that swelling that tends to gather and draw down into the lower extremities from gravity to get pushed back up to the heart where it gets reabsorbed into the system. Getting that swelling out of the knee joint is really important as far as getting good joint mobility as well as good neurology down into the foot, because a swollen knee is going to impact gait mechanics in pretty significant ways. So let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to start on our hands and knees, getting into a quadruped position, spreading fingers out nice and wide, grounding palms. And I want to start, we're just going to do some assessment on the knee space. Really kind of, this is my way of kind of assessing whether there is swelling in the knee, how much swelling there is. And then we're going to do a little foam roller to see if we can get that swelling to move, and then we can come back and see if we actually got some improvement in that knee space. So all we're going to do from here, simple, nice little sit backs. We're going to actually let's start with a few breaths first. So taking a nice inhale breath, filling up that abdominal wall. I want to think like a crocodile or like a balloon, getting that abdominal wall to expand out in all directions. Not just moving down into the belly, but also filling up into the low back space and out into the side walls of the body. Nice inhale in through the nose. Exhale, drawing that navel all the way into the spine. As soon as you exhale fully, we're drawing that breath back in and trying to inflate that balloon of the abdominal wall. We'll get a good 3 to 5 slow breaths just to kind of sink in that breath, that breathing cycle. Nice full inhale. Nice full exhale, and kind of notice if there's any areas of that breath, especially your inhale breath, where it feels tight and tense, maybe difficult to get that abdominal wall to expand fully. And then on the next inhale, we're going to start to let our body rock forward into our wrists. And on the exhale, we're letting our hips sink back to our heels. Kind of just slowly seeing how far can we get hips to heels. Either can we touch the hips to the heels, or do we get a sticky spot in that knee where it doesn't let us any lower. Inhale, we're moving forward. Exhale, we're sinking back hips to heels. And with each one, we're seeing if we can get our hips a little closer to the heels. Inhale, coming right back up. Now, if there's swelling in one knee, more than likely we'll get to a point where one hip is able to get a little closer to the heel, but the other hip is significantly off the heel. That's going to be an indication that that knee is swollen, it's taking up space, it's restricting range of motion, so we're not going to be able to get as much flexion. You may find that both knees are a little tight and swollen, and you're just not able to get that low. So it's possible that we have some bilateral knee inflammation. But noticing if there's a difference between the left side and the right side is going to be pretty important as far as getting a clear indication of what kind of function or dysfunction might be taking place. On the next inhale, as we come up, I now want to tuck the toes, and we're going to continue to do the same thing, but as we're coming back, we're going to load into the toes a little bit. We're still assessing for that space in the knee and seeing how close can we get our hips to our heels. We're also getting a little bit of light foot mobility in to go with this. So on each one, see if you can get a little bit more weight of your hips in your heels, and can you start to sit up? If that knee is really tight, really swollen and painful, then I don't want to come off the hands and I don't want to push into pain. But again, if you're able to get into this position, this is more an assessment. We're seeing how deep can you go, how close can you get your hips to your heels with your toes tucked underneath. So these are two assessments, one with ankles flat and then one with toes tucked. And then we're going to slowly get up and we're going to get our lacrosse ball out and we're going to do a little bit of work on the bottom of our foot. So generally what will happen with swelling in the knee, our heart and our arteries are muscular pumps and they push blood out to the extremities, down to the feet, out to the hands, up to the brain. Our veins are not muscular, so they don't have the ability to push that blood back up to the heart. So what tends to happen when we get swelling is fluid moves down and then gravity keeps it down and it has trouble coming back up to the heart, especially if we have some kind of injury to the joint where we're just not able to move it, because movement is really the pump that helps move that fluid back up. So when we get a joint that's no longer operating as well, we're not going to have that pumping mechanism working as well. So fluid tends to get stagnant and stuck and it drops down. That swelling in the knee will slowly start to move down and you'll get swelling in the ankle and in the foot. So using the lacrosse ball, we're going to kind of use it to help prime the muscular pumps to try to get that fluid flowing again. So that's generally what we're going to do with the lacrosse ball, and then we're going to do some work with the foam roller as well. So I want to start by placing the ball of the big toe on top of the lacrosse ball, and we're going to focus on just the long bone of the big toe. So from that spot of the ball of the foot on the lacrosse ball, we're going to move our foot just a little bit so the ball goes south of the ball, that joint, into the nice meaty space right at the arch of the foot, right below the base of the big toe. And more than likely, that spot's going to be sensitive right off the bat. In fact, let me go ahead and grab my staff so that we have a little bit of extra balance and support while we're doing this, because I don't want to have to worry about losing balance. I want to be able to have something I can lean on so I can just kind of focus on a soft foot. So ball of the foot, getting into that nice meaty space. And from here, I want to imagine that muscle that we're getting into, that tissue we're getting into, is melting butter. And the lacrosse ball or a tennis ball is just a hot knife, and we're just allowing that butter to melt. You put a hot knife onto butter, you don't have to push. The heat of that knife does all the work. And I kind of wanted to have that same sense going on with our foot. So taking some nice deep breaths and just feel the weight of your leg drop into the ball. We don't have to push, we don't have to mash, we're not trying to force it, we're just allowing it to melt. And what you should notice is within 30 to 90 seconds, really from the time at this point, we're already at that 30 to 90 seconds, you should feel that sensitivity start to soften, start to melt, start to reduce. And I want about a 30 to 40% reduction, so we're probably at that point. And so we're going to move a little bit further south, moving towards the heel, getting more into the middle arch of the foot. I'm still along the big toe line, so I'm more on the medial side of the foot, but also right mid-foot. So mid-foot from front to back, medial from outside to inside, more on the inside line of that foot. And again, once you kind of see if you can find a sensitive spot. You're kind of seeking out like what is the most sensitive spot that you can manage without elevating into a pain scale of a 3 or above. I want to always honor our pain scale with massage and with movement. And again, once you find that spot, allow the foot to melt. The ball is a hot knife. And just feeling that melting butter action. And again, once that starts to reduce by 30 to 40%, we can then move the ball underneath the base of the second and third toes. So this is going to be more medial line of the foot. And we're going to move that ball kind of, again, midline or midfoot from front to the foot to the back of the foot. But we're now midfoot in between the big toe and the pinky toe. And if you can find a good sensitive spot, we're going to get that nice deep breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth, and just feel that melt. This is generally a pretty good spot. It hopefully feels good and not extremely painful. Again, if it's painful over a level of 3, either take some weight off or move a little bit adjacent to that spot where it still feels sensitive, but it's not painful. And we can slowly kind of work into that spot once it starts to reduce. Another little thing that you can add as you feel the melting action is you can kind of start to do a little bit of light grip and extension of the toes while you have that light, soft pressure on the ball of the foot. Once we get that nice 30 to 40% reduction, we're then going to move the ball of the foot out to the 4th and 5th toes, the base of the 4th and 5th toes. So we're now on the lateral aspect of the foot. And again, I kind of want to move the ball midfoot between toes and heels, but more to the outside edge of the foot. And again, kind of seeking out where you can find a little, like a sensitive spot in that area. And once you find that spot, and it doesn't need to be painful, it doesn't need to be massively sensitive, but just like a spot that feels good. It's going to be one of those like massage pressure feels good kind of spots. Nice deep breath in and out, melting butter. And again, if you want to add a little bit of soft clench and extension of the toes, and then get back into that nice breath and melt. And once you get that good 30 to 40% reduction on that side, we're then going to switch to the other foot, and we're going to do all the same stuff. So starting ball of the big toe is on the ball, and then you're just going to move the foot a little bit forward so the ball goes underneath that meaty muscle just south of the big toe. Add a little bit of gravity, just allowing that leg to melt onto the ball. And notice if it's more sensitive on this foot or less sensitive. And notice where that you find the sensitivities as we move across the foot, because you might be interesting to notice if one foot it hurts more along the big toe side, the other foot it might hurt more along the outside of the foot. And that could be pretty relevant as far as assessment especially for me, to know kind of how your body is shifting weight through one foot and the other. It's going to say a lot about what's going on in gait mechanics. And so we can kind of help snuff out some issues that might be going on with that information. As this spot starts to reduce, we're going to move a little bit more to the midfoot. Again, midfoot between toes and heels. Again, seeking out a nice sensitive spot. And then getting that in melting action, 30 to 40% reduction in discomfort and sensitivity or density. If it feels really thick, I want a 30 to 40% reduction in that thickness of the muscle that we're working on. My left arch is always a little bit more sensitive in this spot, it seems, than my right one is. So once we get that 30 to 40% reduction, we're going to move the ball, lacrosse ball, to be underneath the second and third toes, and then we're going to move the ball into that midfoot. So it's almost like the ball is in the middle of the foot, midfoot between toes and heel, as well as pinky toe and big toe. And again, once you find, once you get into this area, it tends to be pretty sensitive in and of itself, but we are still kind of trying to find the most sensitive spot that we can without it getting into a level 3 or above. The nice deep breaths in and out, and on that each exhale, allow that melt. Just feel that melting butter on a hot knife. We can add the light clench and extension of the toes. If it feels too much, then you don't have to do that, but sometimes once we get a little bit of soft reduction, adding that flexion and extension of the toes kind of allows the ball to get a little deeper into the tissue, which can get a little bit more areas of kind of softening and, again, priming of those pumps. Then we're going to move the ball to the pinky, the fourth and fifth toes, and then again, moving it down into the midfoot. So now the ball is more to the outside edge of the foot, but still midway between heel and toes. And again, you might find that this is more sensitive than the other side. You might find it is less sensitive than the other side. You may find that both feet feel exactly the same, but usually there's a difference between the right side and the left side. So that's part of the reason I want to pay attention to it, because it can be helpful. My left foot, the ball, the inside line of the foot is more sensitive. The outside line is less sensitive, and it is reversed on my right foot. So once we get a nice 30 to 40% reduction in discomfort, we can set the lacrosse ball off to the side. We're going to come down to the floor, and we're going to grab our foam roller. We're going to spend a few minutes doing some work on the calves. Again, part of what we're doing right now is just getting this fluid to help prime the pumps to get it to move back up the leg. So with the foam roller, we're going to be in a nice, comfortable inverted position. So hopefully shoulders and wrists are strong and feel stable. We're going to place the foam roller in front, and we're just going to start by placing the middle of the calf on top of the foam roller with your toes facing up. And so we have 3 sections that we can work on the calf in order to help kind of prime that pump. And we're largely going to keep the foam roller midsection of the calf. So where the circumference of your calf is thickest, that's where I want to have the foam roller for right now. And we're going to, so right now I got toes facing straight up. That's getting the foam rollers right on the medial line of the calf. If we turn our toes into the midline of our body, we're going to be more on the medial calf. And if we turn the toes out and away, we're going to be more on the lateral calf. So those are the 3 sections that we're going to work. We're going to start medial, so turning the toes in, roughly at a 45-degree angle, so that we're really on that outside or inside edge of the calf. Notice if it's sensitive to start with. It might be super sensitive to where just the weight of your leg is enough pressure. And we want to have that same concept of melting butter on a hot knife. So I want that calf muscle relaxed, softening, let it melt. The weight of your leg, gravity is doing all the work. The foam roller is a hot knife, and you're just allowing that melt. If this feels good and you need a little bit more pressure, And we can take our opposite leg and just place it on top. I don't want to push down. I just want to allow that weight of gravity to do its job. And then just taking some nice deep breaths in and out. And again, I want to feel a 30 to 40% reduction in either discomfort, sensitivity, or like that thickness. Once you feel it's the density of that tissue starts to soften a decent amount, then we can move on to the next section. And just like with the toes, doing our grip and extension of the toes, we can do that with the calf as well. We can do light grip and extension of the toes, and even a little bit of push, plantar flexion of the ankle, and dorsiflexion where we're pulling the ankle back up towards our shin. But I want to be real light with that, and then doing it 1 or 2 times and then allowing it to soften kind of helps us get into that muscle tissue a little bit more. Once we get a 30 to 40% reduction, we're now going to move toes to go straight up and down. So we're now getting right into that midline of the calf, adding the other leg again on top for a little bit of extra gravity in order to get it to melt. From here, we can move, if you're finding it's not very sensitive. More than likely, it's going to be pretty sensitive, especially if you have it swelling in that knee. But if you're not quite finding it, you can move a little bit up and a little bit down. I still want to largely remain in the middle of the medius part of the calf, but kind of see, maybe that moving up and down helps you isolate that sensitive spot. Once you isolate that spot, then we can add that other leg. And again, nice big breaths in and out. With each exhale, just allowing the butter to melt. Again, we can add in light flexion and extension of the toes, little point of the feet and pulling back of the feet, and then letting it soften again. Again, once we get a nice 30 to 40% reduction, then we're turning the foot out to about 45 degrees so that we're now more on that outside edge of the calf. Again, if it's super sensitive and this is good enough, the weight of your leg should be enough. If not, we can add that other leg on top, placing it on top and just allowing that extra gravity. Nice deep breaths in and out and melting butter. And again, keeping it here till we get about a 30 to 40% reduction in discomfort. And again, if you need to move a little bit up and a little bit down on the roller in order to isolate and find the more sensitive spot, you can do that. But one thing with the foam roller that I want to watch out for is I don't actually want to do a whole lot of rolling back and forth. I want to keep that light. I'm only moving in order to isolate where it's sensitive. Once I find a sensitive spot, I do not want to move anymore. I want to melt. And that's going to be a really important thing, especially for the purpose of getting that fluid flow, but also for the purpose of not stimulating your neurology. By rolling over a painful spot back and forth, we may actually be stimulating the neurology to make things more tense and more tight and more restricted. And that's actually the opposite response of what we're trying to get with the foam roller. So I do not want to do a lot of jostling back and forth, and I definitely don't want to mash, and I'm not seeking out pain with the foam roller. It's one of the common things that I see, the way I see people use the foam roller, that I think is actually harmful and not helpful. So again, as we get that nice 30 to 40% reduction, we're then just going to go ahead and switch to the other leg, and we're going to do the same thing. So starting with placing that calf, middle of the calf where it's the thickest, on top of the foam roller. We're then going to turn the foot into about 45 degrees so that we're more medial calf. And then allowing that leg to soften and melt. And if we need to, we can add that other leg on top and just let that gravity do all the work. Just like with the foot, I want to notice if the different spots that we're working on the right side are more or less sensitive than they are on the left side. So medial calf, is it more sensitive on the left leg or on the right leg? When we get to the mid calf, same thing, and when we get to the lateral calf, same thing. Just want to have that awareness of what is it that we're actually experiencing and what might that mean for the way our bodies are moving. As this area starts to soften 30 to 40%, we're then going to point the toes straight up to the ceiling. Again, finding that sensitive spot. We can move a little bit up, a little bit down in order to isolate, and that's it right about there. And then we're going to place that, if we feel comfortable, we can place that other leg and just let that melt. Get nice deep breaths in and out. With each exhale, allow that melting. We can add a little bit of the flexion and extension of the toes or of the ankle. See if that helps us kind of isolate the sensitive spot. And then again, come right back to nice melt. So my mid calf on my left is more sensitive than my right. And one of the things that I find interesting about dealing with a swollen knee. So I've had 5 knee surgeries on my right knee. My right knee is the knee that tends to swell. My right knee is bigger than my left knee. My right calf and ankle are bigger due to that swelling and that swelling moving down the leg. But when I do foam roller work on the lower extremity, it's usually my left side that is tighter and more sensitive than the right side. So sometimes where the swelling and inflammation is at, the patterns that might be leading into that swelling and inflammation could be actually coming from the other side of the body, which is a big reason why we're doing both sides and we're not just focusing on the side that is swollen. Because I want to assess both sides always, because it could be that the opposite side is pulling you into a position that makes the right side work in a way that makes it inflamed. So sometimes the inflammation is not where the inflammation is not where the problem is at, which is kind of an interesting thing to pay attention to. Because if we're always only focusing where it hurts or where it's inflamed, we may not actually be addressing the underlying cause of that irritation. So again, as this area starts to reduce 30 to 40%, we're then going to turn the foot out 45 degrees. Again, we can move up and down a little bit in order to isolate that sensitivity. Find that spot that's most sensitive without being painful, and then allow that foot to relax and soften and melt, and we can add that other leg if we are feeling comfortable. And again, melting butter, hot knife. And I'd say calf-wise, left side, one medial and lateral calf significantly more sensitive than the right side for me. And I'll be curious what you're finding in your foot and calf work in these ways, especially if you're dealing with knee pain. If you're watching on YouTube, comment down below. As this spot reduces by a good 30 to 40%, it's a little extra sensitive on me, so I'm going to actually spend another 30 seconds here or so. I kind of moved down just a little bit and found it's another sensitive spot. So again, nice deep breath in and out. As you feel that spot melt, we can then set the foam roller off to the side, and we're going to come back into our quadruped position. So nice spread hands, grounded palms. Feet are untucked to start with. Nice inhale, inflating our abdominal wall. Exhale, drawing navel into spine. On the next inhale, we'll slightly shift forward. On the exhale, we're letting our hips sink back to our heels. And I want to come back. What we're doing now is we're doing both an assessment, but we're also working to help flush. So flush that fluid from lower extremity up through that knee, trying to get it to move back up towards the heart. So with each one, we're sinking back hips to heels, seeing if we can get the hips a little deeper. Inhale, we're coming all the way back forward. And we're going to do about, I would say, good 10 reps on this. And with each one, see if you can get the hips a little deeper. Are you able to get that hip a little closer to the heel, especially if you had inflammation in one of the knees? And I want to go slow with this with breath. I do not want to be fast. Part of the reason I don't want to be fast is the faster we go, the harder it's going to be to control. And I want to make sure that we are not moving into painful patterns around the knee, especially if it is already inflamed. After we get about 10 reps, we're then going to tuck the toes. And so doing the same thing as we sink hips to heels, I want to feel the load of that hip in the big toe joint so that we can get some big toe mobility, but we're also seeing how low can we get the hips, how much range of motion do we have at the knee. Inhale, coming all the way back up. And again, we're going to do a good 10 slow reps on this, keeping it synced to the speed of our breath. And this is a good place to also start to notice the big toe joints. How does the right big toe feel compared to the left big toe? Does one side feel a little stiffer and a little achier than the other? If there's inflammation in just one knee, more than likely one of the big toes is going to be stiffer than the other big toe. It could be on the side of the knee that's inflamed. I would say there's probably an 80% chance that that's the case. Most of the time, that's going to be the problem. But it could be that it's on the opposite side. And again, on the opposite side is that idea that sometimes where the pain is at or where the inflammation is at is not where the problem lies. So I want to keep that awareness open that maybe it's that opposite side foot, and that is really kind of pulling the knee into a position that inflames it. Good. All right, so hopefully you got a little bit more range of motion out of that knee just from adding in the lacrosse ball and the foam roller. We're now going to get into our shin box position. I'm on my left side shin box. My left knee is forward, the side that my chest kind of naturally wants to open and face to. Left hand is coming down outside the hip, and then spinning that elbow out and away. Feel the shoulder blade pack down and back, and try to lift and open through the chest like you're lifting your sternum up to the ceiling. And we're going to focus on the back hip. Inhale, letting that hip drop. On the exhale, we're scooping our tailbone and moving our hip bone forward. I want to feel that hip lift off the floor as much as possible. And we're seeing how much extension can we get in the front of the hip. Inhale, we're letting that hip all the way back down, seeing if we can touch the floor. And really what I'm looking at is range of motion. How close can you get to the floor? If you're able to sit that hip to the floor, great. If not, it's not a big deal, but how close can you get? And then lifting it off the floor and rolling it over the opposite hip. How high can you get it to go and how forward can you go? And can you feel this stretch in the front of the hip space? Inhale, letting it down. Exhale, scoop. And I want to play in the juicy nature of that stretch of the front of the hip. With each one, can you move into it just lightly a little bit further without forcing it? And can you get a little bit more range from the floor up to the top? After about 5 reps, we're going to shin box across to the other side. And we're going to do the same thing. Grounding palm, spiral, spinning that elbow out and away, packing the shoulder down and back, lifting up through the sternum. Inhale, let that back hip drop to the floor. Exhale, scooping it forward. And right off the bat, notice, is this hip more or less mobile than the other hip? More than likely, one hip is going to be a little tighter in this range of motion. My left hip is really tight today. Inhale, let that hip drop. Exhale, scoop as we go forward. So again, I tend to get knee inflammation and swelling in my right knee, 5 surgeries. But my left hip and foot are the side that are tighter. This is the side that does most of the compensating for the instability that's on my right knee. So again, I want to really pay attention to how does it feel on both sides. Because right now, I've got basketball camp this week. Last night I had good number of hours on the court, and I was teaching dynamic jumping drills. So I've got some low back tightness, discomfort, and my hip is just really, really tight. A little bit tighter than it normally is. So nice and slow. Inhale, let it drop. Exhale. With each one, we're playing in the juicy nature of that stretch as we squeeze into it. Can we get that joint to open up a little bit more range without forcing it and without moving into pain? We're then going to shin box back across to the other side. And now we're going to get into, we're going to add in some reach. So doing the same thing with that hip, back hip. Inhale, let it drop. Exhale, we're scooping it forward. And I want to get as much of forward as we can. And I want to hold that position. And now with our free hand, I want to imagine that we got a piece of bread. And we got a buddy that's standing right next to us through the knee. And we're going to reach through that knee and see how far can we reach our fingertips. Inhale, we're bringing it all the way back to let that hip drop to the floor. Exhale, scoop at the hip first. Load the front of that thigh and then add in your reach. See if you can draw that stretch from the hip into a little rotation into your low back. Like I said, my low back is tight. This feels really tight. I got a good, I'm definitely not quite as mobile in my low back today, at least not yet. We're going to work it out because I got more basketball to do today. And we're going to shin box back across to the other side. We're going to do the same thing. Grounded palm. Spiraled elbow, pack shoulder. Inhale, let that hip drop. Exhale, scoop. Get that scoop as much as we can, and then reaching through that knee to share our bread. Oh, man, yeah, low back feels nice and tight. Inhale, bringing it all the way back. Exhale, scoop. Again, I want to lock in that front of the hip and then add to it. I don't want my rotation to take away from this hip. And if it feels, if you're getting nice and nice stretch, if it feels tight and you're getting into it, I want to make sure we're not forceful and we're just playing in the juicy nature of that stretch. Again, I got some low back tightness with rotation in both directions. So now I want to go a little bit side to side with this movement. So we're going to do a nice windshield wiper shin box all the way across. Hips dropped, exhale, scoop, and then reach with rotation. Inhale, bringing it all the way back, and then we're going to shin box back across to the other side. We're going to go back and forth like 5 times. And really get a sense of comparison of how does this movement feel as we go to the left side, extending that hip, feeling the hip, and then how far can we reach and where do you feel the stretch? Bringing it all the way back across. We're going to compare it to this side. Getting into position, engaging that hip. How does that hip feel? And how does that rotation feel? In what ways are the left side and right side of this movement similar, and in which ways are they dissimilar? As we come back to our starting spot, now we're going to get into our folds. So I want to kind of use the shin as our arrow. We're going to reach both hands. Inhale as we're tall. Exhale, we're reaching both hands through the shin, and I want to keep square with that shin. And I only want to reach as far as we can with both hands even. I don't want to reach where one hand's going farther than the other hand. That generally means we have some tightness in the low back that's restricting our movement. So we're going to inhale as we're up. Exhale as we fold and reach, dropping our chest down to the floor softly. Inhale, bringing it all the way back up. And with each exhale as we fold, we're softly reaching a little further if we can. Inhale back up and a little further if we can. Once we get to 5, we can then shin box across to the other side. And we're going to do the exact same thing. Again, using that shin as the arrow. Inhale at the top. Exhale as we fold. Both hands reaching even. And again, this is a big assessment point. How does it feel on this side compared to the other side? Is it tighter? Is it more restrictive? Are you having trouble getting as far? And where does it feel tight? That's going to be an important assessment point as well. With each one, we're softly reaching a little further, dropping our chest softly to the floor. And just like with our rotations, once we get to 5, I now want to start working side to side, going back and forth. Nice reach through the left side. Inhale, bringing it all the way back up. We'll do a breath cycle as we transition through. And we get to the right side. Nice exhale as we reach. Again, playing in the juicy nature of the stretch. I do not want to force it. I'm not trying to push beyond the stretch. I'm kind of playing in that level of the stretch where it feels really good and it's not painful. It can be at that level of a slightly discomfort, but in the way that it feels good. It should not be sharp pain, and it definitely don't want pain over a level 3 on a scale of 0 to 10. And as we're going back and forth, I want to pay attention. I really want to kind of assess, how does it feel left side to right side? What ways does it feel similar? And what ways does it feel dissimilar? Where is it tighter? Where do you move better? Good. All right, so now we're going to lay on our back. And we're going to let our legs go nice and straight to start with. We're going to bend one knee and bring that foot flat to the floor. And then we're going to move that foot out about 45 degrees from the midline of the body. The other leg should be perfectly straight. This is where I want to have a nice tripod foot. So I want to make sure the knee is staying over the heel on this. And we're going to start by just doing some light glute activations by pressing down into the floor. I want to drive my knee downward. By driving it downward, we're scooping that hip up towards the ceiling. Now, my opposite leg is not working. I am not doing a bridge where I'm lifting both hips off the floor. My opposite leg is relaxed. When I press, I'm driving through my left leg. That is lifting my left hip up and slightly rotating it over as if I'm going to roll all the way over onto my belly from this position. So my opposite leg should not be pushing down, lifting the opposite hip off the floor. As we scoop the tailbone up, I want to see if we can feel this stretch in the front of the hip. And can you start to feel some contraction in the glute? I want to feel, does that glute get tight? Can you feel it tight, like it's working? Inhale, we're letting it right back down to the floor. Exhale, we're scooping up a little higher. And again, I want to make sure that we got flat tripod feet. I want those feet to be nice and spread out and grounded all the way through. Knees should be pushing straight down into that heel. Can you feel that glute contraction at the top? A lot of people try to over move on this. This is a very small, isolated movement. The main thing I want to feel here is locking that hip up at the top to where you feel that maximum contraction in the glute. Once you feel that maximum contraction in the glute, we can then add more pressure down through the foot and get that glute to fire even more. And my way I like to think about this is, imagine you got grapes underneath your feet or underneath that foot, and grapes are like all the way out to your pinky toe, to your heel, to your big toe, and you got to squash all the juice out of all the grapes evenly. So you got to really mash down in order to press that hip up as much as you can to get as much engagement in that glute. Then we're going to switch and do the same thing on the other side. So again, both legs are straight to start, bending that opposite knee to bring the foot flat to the floor, and then moving that foot out to about 45 degrees from the midline of the body. Spread foot, grounded foot. We're going to press down into the floor to scoop that hip up to the ceiling. Inhale, bringing it back down. With each one, we're trying to scoop a little bit more into it. Again, the opposite leg needs to be soft and relaxed. There should be no push in that opposite heel. This opposite leg should not be pushing into the floor. It needs to be nice and floppy and soft. If you are finding it difficult to isolate one side over the other, that's actually a big deal. That's going to be something important. That's going to be an indication of some compensation pattern in the lower body. That one leg, the neurology in one leg is weak, and so the other leg is compensating. And so that neurology is kind of being split, and you don't know how to use one leg without the other leg overacting. So we want to work on this in order to help improve the neurology and function to the side that we're working on. Again, each one we're scooping up a little bit more, really trying to notice that glute. Again, it's not a lot of movement, it's a scoop, feel the stretch in the front, and find that contraction, that tension in the glute. And once you can find that locked in glute, where it locks in as much as it can, then we can start to mash into those grapes and really squash the grapes. The more we mash is not going to add more range. It's not going to change our position. It's going to make that glute fire harder. The position will be the same. The glute's going to work more. Once we get nice and balanced out with that, we're going to come back up to a nice seated position, and we're going to get into our V-sit. Nice wide legs, as wide as we can, actively reaching the knees down towards the floor. We're actively pulling the tops of the feet back like we're folding them onto our shins. Hands are down on the ground behind our hips. I want to ground through those palms, Spiral both elbows out and away so that you can feel your shoulder blades pack down and back and lift up through the sternum. We're going to focus on the knees, doing our spirals through the knees, trying to spin the knee out like you're trying to touch the kneecap to the floor on the outside, and then spinning internal like you're trying to touch the knees to the floor on the inside. Keep those feet actively pulled back. Keep the knees actively reaching down to the floor. The more those knees are reaching down, you should kind of feel your quads naturally tight, lighting up, engaging. We're going to exhale in both directions on this. So you're going to exhale as you rotate internally. Inhale as you bring it to center. And then exhale as you rotate externally. And as you're going back and forth, notice the difference of how does this feel on the right side compared to the left side. Is one side a little tighter than the other? And again, if one leg knee is a little swollen and inflamed compared to the other, I want to notice, like, what is the range of motion difference on these two knees? Does one go further internal? Does one go further external? And it might be on the opposite side from the inflammation. My left leg is the one that has less mobility, especially internally, and I can feel it deep in that internal rotator of the hip. Good. So once we feel that kind of loosening up of those rotators, we're now going to see if we can bring our hands off the floor, and we're going to do a little bit of fold work. I want to get into that back line of the legs again. And again, this is a little bit of flushing, also getting a little bit into the hamstrings. So I'm going to continue to have the knees actively reaching down, feet actively pulling back, and we're going to do some folds. So inhale, we're up tall. Exhale, we're letting our hands reach evenly down the floor as we exhale. Inhale, we're coming right back up. Exhale, we're seeing if we can softly reach a little bit further without forcing it. I like to imagine hands are a wave moving up a beach with our exhale, coming back down on our inhale. Notice, how does this feel on the back of the thighs and the back of the knees? Does one side feel tighter and more restricted? Do you find that one knee wants to sit a little higher off the floor, and is it harder to push it down into the floor? Again, that will be an indication of inflammation and swelling in the knee. As you're starting to get a little bit more reach in your fold, we're now going to start moving a little off center, a little bit off to the right. As we reach, though, keep both hands together and reaching evenly. Inhale comes back, and then same thing to the opposite side. This will get a little bit more isolation into that back line of the leg from one side to the other. So it's a great place to assess, how does that left side feel when we reach to the left compared to how does that right side feel? And as we're going side to side, we can kind of continue to open it up. Reach a little bit more out to the side, getting a little bit closer to our heels. And we can go reach straight to the heels. My left side is tighter than the right side. I got more range going to this right side. Even though the right side is the side that's generally more inflamed, my left side is the side that is less mobile, especially in that back line of the hamstring. Good. All right. So we're going to come back to our back. Let our knees bend, feet can be flat to the floor. And we're going to make two big C shapes with our hands, thumbs going in the back into our low back musculature. Index fingers are going into the front, into the abdominal musculature, and the palms are pressing into the side body. So we're making this big C shape. We're doing this because I want to work on inflating the balloon of the abdominal wall, and so our hands are going to work as resistance. So we're going to take a nice inhale, and on our inhale, I want to feel the abdominal wall push out and away, pushing forward into the index fingers, pushing back into the thumbs, and pushing out to the sides into the palms. As we exhale, draw that navel all the way in towards your spine, like you're trying to touch your spine with your belly button. As you get the last of that breath out, allow your hands to clench down a little bit to create more resistance, and then immediately fill up that balloon. How wide, how big can you inflate the balloon on the inhale? How much can you deflate that balloon on the exhale? And with each inhale, can you fill that balloon up a little bit more? We'll get a good 5 to 6 full breaths in and out. As you fill up that space with that balloon, on your exhale, draw navel into spine, but also notice any tension in your shoulders and in your neck. And if you're feeling tension in the shoulders and the neck, let the shoulders and the neck soften on that exhale. After 5 to 6 breaths, we can let our arms drop down to the side. We're going to continue with that balloon breath. But I also want to bring that balloon breath more up into the chest and into the neck and shoulders. Inhale, fill that balloon up. On the exhale, let any tension in the shoulders and in the neck rinse off the body onto the floor. And take a minute or so of breath. Nice inhale, nice exhale. Noticing any tension in the body. Inhale, breathe into that tension. And on the exhale, allow that tension to melt. And when you're ready, we can slowly open our eyes and very slowly go from lying down to sitting, and from sitting to standing, making sure that you're not dizzy or lightheaded before you come all the way up.